Want to expand the reach of your content? Start a podcast. Feature industry experts on your show and leverage the influence and reach of your guests to grow your brand. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I am your host for this episode, Nikki Ivy with Sweetfish Media. I've got with me today David Pyrzenski, Vice President of Professional Services at Terminus. David, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
So glad to have you with us today. So we're going to be talking about account-based marketing, how to measure things the right way and sort of the smart way to think about KPIs to maximize effectiveness there, and the scale of disruptive communication, and just sort of how to think about these things for folks who are just beginning. But before we get into that, David, I'd love for you to just give a little bit of background about yourself and what you guys are up to at Terminus these days.
Great. No, thank you very much. Yeah, I come from the world of marketing automation. And prior to Terminus, I was working for IBM, doing a lot of their global go-to-market strategy for marketing services. And now at Terminus, what we do is focus on creating services for our customers that really help them both adopt and expand their account-based marketing programs using our solution, which is a 360-degree hub or command center for running your ABM program.
Perfect. And that's something that I know a lot of folks are really interested in. And so I'm excited to just jump right in to these topics that we're going to cover today. So first, can you just give a little crash course in ABM 101 for those folks who are still trying to wrap their minds around it?
Yeah, absolutely. So account-based marketing is a way to target and engage and activate the customers and accounts that you feel have the best propensity or would be most interested in buying your product and would be a good fit. And so instead of an inefficient method in which you would just try to hope that anyone can gravitate towards your product or service, you make an effort to go out and actually target those accounts that you want to win. And so ABM, by its nature, is a graduator process or a tiered process where you put incremental investment or time as an investment into going after those different accounts.
Interesting. And so would you say that it sort of starts folks off with the relationship in mind, start as far as how you start your journey with the prospect versus, being so acquisition minded first and then worrying about the relationship? Would you say that kind of is one of the tenets of account-based marketing?
Yeah, in a sense. So the thing about account-based or thinking about the relationships that you have with customers as prospects, or what we like to call future customers, is that the stronger the relationship, the more you can exploit a curve that I've thought of, which is on one side, sort of how disruptive is your advertising, and on the other side, how effective it is. And so when you think about it, think about something like on one side, which would be very disruptive, but very effective, like SMS or text marketing or cold calling or calling into somebody type marketing. That you have a really good chance of getting through or getting somebody. But on the other hand, it's very disruptive. So it may sort of turn people off, or they may want to say, do not market to me. And on the other end of the scale, you have something like billboard advertising or very broad, say, network or radio advertising or print magazine advertising, where you're not getting very specific or very targeted, but it's completely non-disruptive. No matter how much of it is out there, it really doesn't turn anybody off, but is it as effective as it could be? So when you get towards the middle, you start getting to things like account-based advertising, which is more targeted, or things like targeted email advertising, where the customer receiving that email, it's not necessarily spam, it's for a service or product that would be of interest to them.
So for a given future customer, not everybody is going to respond, would you say, to content that's at the same place on that scale of disruptive communication? So you have to really be, would you say, sort of intentional about that every single time versus trying to find sort of a standard medium for where your content will land in general? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. And the stronger the relationship or the more known you are to that prospect, the more disruptive you can be and get away with it, or the more that the context or timing, meaning their intent to purchase a solution like yours, is relevant, the more open they'll be to receiving your communication or your advertisement. And there's almost an interesting inverse when you get into things like customer marketing, because at that point you already have an established relationship. There's already an expectation of communication. And so sometimes you have to be very disruptive to cut through the noise of maybe competitors trying to get their attention. And you need to basically say, hey, we're in a relationship. We are partnering on this. So please respond to me and let's be in communication.
Right. And I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, one example of that we talked about with some leaders of mine was knowing whether or not you were in an emoji level relationship with either a future customer or a customer, right? Because that's I guess an element of disruption that, either like you said, either you've established a relationship where that makes sense and you can, get in there and do that, or you haven't. Or things like LinkedIn voice memos, right? Either you're at a place where you better only be, sending very sort of formulaic text, or you can just shoot them a memo and say, hey, what's going on? I missed you 3 days in a row. You know what I mean? Is that sort of the thing we're talking about? I love this idea of this scale of disruptive communication. I haven't ever heard it packaged this way, but there's parallels between the way that you're talking about applying it in ABM and the way that it can be applied to like individual branding on LinkedIn. It's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we have reps that have personal relationships with people that they have their personal cell phone and will text them emojis, to your point, and ask them how things are going. Are they considering a new product, or do they just want to get lunch? And when you have that sort of informality in your relationship, it sort of transcends any type of marketing, whether it be traditional demand gen or account-based. I mean, it really does change the relationship altogether. But when we're thinking about it from an account-based approach, it's really about that we know your business is trying to grow or adopt or move in a position that we can help you with. And it makes sense for us to have some level of communication, more so than if we were just strangers.
Sure. And so that kind of leads me into this last bullet point that I wanted to hit on with you. This stuff is so exciting. And I think it sort of is more in line with, I think, the instincts of the people who get into marketing or sales in the first place, right? A lot of us are relationship oriented to begin with. Right. We're disruptive to begin with. Yeah. But it's tough to measure some of those things, right? Yes. Or measure the effect of our efforts. And you've kind of come up with how to know if this sort of disruption that you're talking about, or this account-based marketing, is working, and how the way we measure that differs now from what we think of or thought of traditionally. Get into that for us a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So with account-based, especially with the Terminus solution as sort of a shameless plug, but we do look to measure with our account-based scorecard things that are business-driven, like revenue and sales velocity and net number of opportunities created, and things like that really show that the business is making an improvement. And we look at all of your marketing influence that's driving those numbers through various channels and with various correlations. And so when we do that and we approach that system, we know that some of our customers will say, this is great and this is how I should measure. But as of today, until I can make that transition, we still measure things like leads and like leading indicator type metrics and not the end of the funnel, like dollars and cents, right?
Sure.
So we still need to be able to measure that. And so they ask, if we move to more targeted approach, if we move to something like account-based advertising, what will happen to my leads? It will show that we have much fewer leads, right? And so the way that we help them sort of circle that square is we say, account-based is like we said, a progression. It's a tiered structure where both the amount you're spending on the accounts in terms of advertising or marketing efforts and the time is incremental as you move up. And so that time also goes into your time with sales. So if you're partnering really closely with your sales team to pick the right accounts and prioritize the right accounts and have them segmented in the right tiers, then when you go out and you do this type of advertising, very targeted, when someone does raise their hand and says, this is of interest to me, please contact me. That's your traditional like lead, right? Like they fill out a form or they worked on a chatbot with you or something. Instead of just qualifying them, just putting them in as a net new lead, the next step is usually marketing qualified lead. And then the next step is like sales accepted lead. No matter the closer the relationship and the more targeted you've been, you can actually count that hand raise as at least a marketing qualified lead and almost as a sales accepted lead. So whereas your total number of leads may start to decline, those marketing qualified leads and sales accepted leads should increase more than they were previously. Because then you're comparing apples to apples and then your business is actually making real progress.
For sure. And that goes into another little thing that you and I talked about offline, which was that alignment between marketing and sales. And yes, taking some of the salespeople don't like legwork a lot of the time. They don't like anything administrative where they have to think too much before they reach out to someone. And
Right.
So the value of having something come in already sales accepted without all of that, uncertainty around it or those things that a salesperson would typically have to clear up that cause that sort of friction a lot of the time. I think that's one of the biggest pieces of value in this approach that you guys are advancing over at Terminus and that account-based marketing in general sort of opens up to people. And so, yeah, it's really exciting stuff. If you had, for folks who are looking to just wrap their heads around this stuff or maybe dip their toe in the water or maybe get folks in their organization bought in to try and start this stuff, where would you tell those folks to start? And how can we help tee this up for them internally?
Yeah, so for people that are completely greenfield, coming in it from very cold, I would say work on defining your total addressable market. And I guarantee you someone in like finance or someone in your company that put together your original pitch on like what your company does and how much money it could make knows that total addressable market, right? So define that total addressable market and then go out and look for every account based on like an ideal customer profile that could possibly fit in that total addressable market or in that ICP. And you'll get like maybe hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe tens of thousands of accounts, and then make any very high level attempt to tier those accounts into like, if you were going to invest like an A level, B level, and C level, your marketing dollars and your time with sales in terms of focus, how would you break down those accounts? If you can start there, then the rest of the stuff will start like clicking into place and making a lot of sense.
That makes so much sense. And like I said, the parallels that I kind of want to micro apply this to my LinkedIn branding strategy. I'm stealing it all, David.
Good.
This has really been great. I'm so glad that you and I got to talk today. And best of luck to you guys. And I'm excited about what y'all are doing over at Terminus. And we'll talk again soon. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been great.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.